Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Ram Ram Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram Hare 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 Krishna
And turn on
Krishna
the
Krishna
other
Hare
lights.
Hare Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare Ram Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna
Pranam Sankirtan ki jai. Kirti Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.
Thank you, Prabhu, for giving your association. We offer our respectful obeisances.
Hare
Krishna.
Just give a quick introduction and you can get started, Prabhu.
Okay.
His Grace Sruta Kirti Prabhu joined in the early days of the Hare Krishna explosion. Soon he was secretary to Srila Prabhupada and also personal servant. He would travel with Srila Prabhupada to various countries. He noted the details of his travels and thus he is one of the greatest speakers on Srila Prabhupada pastimes, has been widely preaching everywhere in the world, fulfilling Srila Prabhupada's mission. He is now residing in Sri Vrindavan Dham. And he has a new book, What is the Difficulty? So, thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. You can get started. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharni Nir Vishesha Sanyavari Vastajari. So I was looking at your poster, your advertisement for this class, and of course speaking about Lord Nityananda Triyodasi, which was just the other day, and Gaur Purnima, which is in a few weeks. I was actually quite amazed that all these festivals have come up. You know, like you, we've all been under very, very unusual situation for the last year. Our last year, our Gaur Purnima festival, a temple was locked down. Now, 1 year later, you know, we reside in India. It's a very special place. I don't know if you follow me on social media, on Facebook, I've been putting some videos and photos on. So our temple is completely open. It's been open for some weeks, but now it's very open here in the land of Vrindavan. We're having Vrindavan Kumbh Mela is currently going on. It started about 2 weeks ago, or about a week ago. It'll be going on for another 3 weeks. And of course, we're following Prabhupada's program for the Kumbh Mela festival. We have a pandal there. So every day we have Nagar Sankirtan through this. They've created a whole city there. They spent crores of rupees to set up this festival in a very big way in Vrindavan. So we're doing Nagar Sankirtan. We have our Padayatra team with Sri Sri Gaur Nitai. And of course, Prasadam distribution is there and book distribution is there. Of course, this was always Prabhupada's, 3-point program: Prasadam distribution, chanting, and book distribution. So this is our emphasis at this festival. Today, amazingly enough, today is February 28th. So I don't know if one of the very big famous lectures Srila Prabhupada gave was on this very day, February 28th, and the year was 1975. And that lecture was in Atlanta. And it's known as, it's the shortest lecture Prabhupada ever gave, and probably the most famous lecture Prabhupada gave. I actually have the audio of that lecture, and a little later on, hopefully the way things will move, I want to play that lecture for you, because since what you've asked me to speak about here, I wanted to concentrate on that. I also had one letter from one of our godbrothers, Mukundlal Prabhu, who became Bhakti, was it Vishvambar Madhava Maharaj? Madhurya, Bhakti Madhurya Maharaj. He just left his body some months ago, and he was put in Samadhi here in Vrindavan. And he joined, him and his brother Narayan, they joined in the late 60s. I believe he joined in 1968. And in reading Prabhupada's books, he was very much reading about how one has to get the mercy of Lord Nityananda. And he was writing in Prabhupada that way. He was trying to understand how he has to approach Lord Nityananda. And I made it a point over the last several years reading Prabhupada's letters to his disciples, because for me, as you said, I traveled with Prabhupada for 2.5 years. So I have a very certain mindset with Srila Prabhupada. I like to listen to his conversations, his lectures, his morning walks, and read his letters, because from the very time I was with him, I felt most comfortable in this way. So in reading these letters, I remember seeing a few letters from Maharaj that he wrote to Prabhupada, trying to understand how to serve and how to get the mercy of Lord Nityananda. And Prabhupada goes on in one letter, and in the letter he tells him, he says, Lord Chaitanya is combined form of Radha Krishna. If Chaitanya is pleased, Radha and Krishna automatically come pleased. Now our mission, Krishna consciousness mission, is to execute the will of Lord Chaitanya. In this old age, whatever I am trying to do is just to give a little service according to my capacity. That's also a phrase Prabhupada uses many times in his preaching, in his speaking, is saying someone has to serve according to his capacity. So here he's saying it about himself. I'm trying to serve according to my capacity. I have not come here for some personal credit in this old age. I have also come here under the order of my spiritual master, who is non-different from Lord Nityananda. So here, of course, he speaks about his Guru Maharaj. He doesn't say, Prabhupada doesn't say, I'm different than Lord Nityananda, but he says, my Guru Maharaj, my spiritual master, who's non-different from Lord Nityananda. And of course, we know Lord Nityananda, he's like Balaram, Adi Guru. He's the very first spiritual master. So, and then Prabhupada says in the next paragraph, you are helping me in the execution of my mission. So please do not try to do anything beyond the jurisdiction of my instructions. My will I have already disclosed to you, all that each and every one of you should chant the Mahamantra 16 rounds, follow the 4 regulative principles, chant Hare Krishna mantra on the streets, distribute our books and literatures. So, as I was saying when I started out, and what we're doing here for Kumbh Mela, so Prabhupada's describing how we don't have to separately approach so many personalities, but just by pleasing the spiritual master. And in our society, of course, just by pleasing Srila Prabhupada, Lord Nityananda is pleased, Lord Chaitanya is pleased, Radha Krishna are pleased. It's not that we have to become in anxiety thinking, oh, I have to go here, I have to go there. Of course, we can always meditate on these personalities, but the way we please them is to follow Srila Prabhupada's orders. So what I was going to speak about a little today is one of my favorite topics in class, is describing Prabhupada's travels. And this was a very special tour. This tour happened in 1975. I mentioned this lecture February 28th today, 1975. Prabhupada started this tour from Mumbai, from Juhu. He left India in January, towards the end of January. And from that point, he traveled 2 months and he stopped in about a dozen different temples in those 2 months. And at the end of that tour, he wound up back in India, in Mayapur, for Gaur Purnima festival. So it was right around this very time that 45, 46 years ago, that Prabhupada was taking this trip. And as his servant, now by this time, I had been literally with Prabhupada for 2 years as his servant. And I saw something during these travels in 1975 that I had not witnessed before. So we'll speak about that a little bit. As Prabhupada left Mumbai, he stopped in Japan, where, of course, Krishna consciousness has developed slowly over the years. At this point, still now it's becoming bigger and bigger. The Japanese people are taking to Krishna consciousness. And then he went to Hawaii, which Prabhupada stopped in this tiny islands of Hawaii 9 times. And he spent over 3 months in Hawaii. It was a very nice place, very conducive to his translating work. He liked the climate there very much. And he always made it a stopping point as he traveled east or west from the USA to Asia. So then after there, he went to Los Angeles, which of course we know he was in Los Angeles very early on, 1968. So then from that point, something happened. And Prabhupada was very much ecstatic, literally ecstatic, as he was traveling to the different temples around the world. So after Los Angeles, Prabhupada went to Mexico City. So now each temple he would go to, in the temples, he would always see Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. And it happened in Mexico City. When he arrived, he was seeing how these Prabhus, Prabhupada says it sometimes, these 2 Prabhus have come to this place just to give you Krishna consciousness, just to give you love of Godhead. So in Mexico City, while he was giving his arrival lecture, he became a little choked up. And then he continued to speak. But from my perspective is what I was seeing when Prabhupada's far, far away from India. He's halfway around the world, and he's seeing people chanting Hare Krishna. He's seeing that he's turned these people into Vaishnavas halfway around the world. He saw Lord Chaitanya was doing this. Lord Nityananda was doing this, and he would mention it in his lecture. And then he went, after spending 1 week in Mexico City, he went to Caracas, Venezuela. So this is his one and only trip into South America. Mexico is considered Central America. So, but now he went into South America, Caracas, Venezuela, and he spent 1 week there. And at the temple, it was a very scenic place. It was a small temple. And again, he arrives at the temple, and there's Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda with their hand raised, benedicting everyone there. And Prabhupada gave a very similar lecture to this one we're going to hear in a little bit. And he said how kind Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda are. And he said to the devotees there, he's traveled very far to be with you. So this was Prabhupada's perception, how Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, they're freely giving Krishna to everyone. And Prabhupada became choked up. He had tears in his eyes. He was unable to speak at times, but due to this ecstasy in seeing Krishna consciousness. And of course, we understand it was Prabhupada who was given this facility. It was Prabhupada who had this service. He had traveled very far. He traveled around the world 14 times in 10 years, in his 70s and his 80s, to give Krishna to everyone around the world. But Prabhupada was just seeing how merciful Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda is. While we were there, One of my god sisters was telling me, I'm staying in MVT here in Vrindavan, across the street from the temple. And she was telling me there was this one devotee girl at the time, and she left the temple. She had very difficult time dealing with devotees. She saw that devotees had many faults, and she was very critical. She would complain, they're doing like this and they're doing like this. And so she left the temple. So one day while Prabhupada was staying at the temple for a week, this devotee lady, my god sister, she saw her when she went shopping one day. And she said, "You please come to the temple." She said, "Prabhupada's at the temple. You come and take Prabhupada's association. Please come hear his classes." So the next day she came to the temple. Now in South America, like Mexico is one of the more unusual places, Prabhupada would speak in English and his lectures were being translated by Hridayananda Maharaj at the time. This was something that didn't often happen. Prabhupada would generally speak in English and they would have to understand in English. Sometimes here in India, he would just speak in Hindi. At many of the pandals, he would just speak in Hindi, and us Western disciples, we would just sit and listen. There would be no translation into English, but we would sit anyway and listen to the transcendental sound vibration from Prabhupada's lips. So she came to the lecture, but apparently the way she saw things hadn't changed much. So after Prabhupada spoke, he said, "Are there any questions?" So she raised her hand and she said, "Srila Prabhupada," she said, "I see that these devotees in the temple, that in this temple, there's Maya in the temple." So of course, everyone was very much kind of shocked and a little upset that this girl had spoken like this to Prabhupada at the class. So she said, "I see that there's Maya in the temple." And Prabhupada, who always was able to speak just perfectly, give perfect responses, he looked at her and he said, "You show me the place where there's no Maya." He said, "And I'll go there." So all the devotees kind of Haribol, and Prabhupada smiled and gave a little chuckle and a little laugh. And then he looked at her and he said, "You see that there's Maya in the temple because you're in Maya." Such a bummer, you have your microphone on. So then Prabhupada said, "I see that all these devotees are very sincerely serving, sincerely serving Krishna." So this is the eyes of a devotee. This is pure devotee. He sees he's engaged everyone in devotional service. So in that way, he satisfied and encouraged all the devotees, and he took that situation and he turned it around. So then I didn't mention when we were there in Caracas. Caracas was a place, Venezuela, South America, up in the northern part of South America. So I initially was with Prabhupada as a servant for 16 months. And after 16 months, I left Prabhupada. I got married, and the temple president of Caracas invited me to go there. So I was there for 6 months, living in Caracas, Venezuela. I was the only Brahmin in the temple, so I was giving many classes, which also had to be translated into Spanish. And I was in the kitchen cooking because I was the Brahmin in the temple. So now I left there after being there for about 6 months. And somehow or other, by Krishna's arrangement, by Prabhupada's mercy, I wound up being Prabhupada's servant again. And now I was a servant, I was a grahasta. But Prabhupada didn't make any distinction. Brahmachari, grahasta, sannyasi. You traveled with him, you did service, and that was it. So when I went back to Caracas as his servant, I knew all the devotees in the temple. I had been there for many months. So I was very happy to come back to Caracas again as Prabhupada's servant. I wasn't just some devotee in the temple, but now I was Prabhupada's servant. And of course, they all knew that because most of my classes were talking about Srila Prabhupada. So I was feeling a little proud as Prabhupada's servant. So when we arrived at the temple, we had just come from Mexico City, which was a little cold, a little chilly. And Prabhupada had socks on. So we get to the temple, Prabhupada goes, and as his servant, my service was I followed him around. I had his cane, I had his glasses, I would have his Bhagavatam for classes like that. So Prabhupada went and sat on the Vyasasana. So while he was sitting on the Vyasasana, I had, instead of being attentive to my service, I turned around and I'm looking at all these devotees I recognized. Pavidas was there, Chiksukananda was there, so many people I knew. And I was kind of smiling, and here I am. So as I was doing that, all of a sudden, and I turned and looked, and Prabhupada, he had taken his socks off, which is a service that I would do. So he took his socks off, he rolled them into a ball, and he threw them at me. He threw them right at my head to wake me up to what my position was by throwing his socks on my head. So then I came back down to earth, and I realized what my service was. So that it was very sweet. Prabhupada corrected me, gave me a little chastisement, but he gave me great affection. He threw his socks at me. So he stayed there for a week, very happily, just giving all these hundreds of devotees in South America. He saw them chanting. So when he arrived again, he was overwhelmed and tears were in his eyes. He said, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, he said, these two Prabhus, he said, they're very kind. So then from there, Prabhupada went to Miami, Florida in the USA. It was a short trip, few-hour trip. And he stayed there just for a day or two. But the same thing again happened. He gets into the temple, and there's Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, hands up in the air, dancing, chanting and dancing. And again, Prabhupada started saying how merciful Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda are. They're so kind. He said, distributing love of Godhead. And again, he became choked up. This was something that was just there at this time. Prabhupada, he could not contain his ecstatic symptoms, which was very unusual. All the time I was with him, I had never seen this, but now everywhere we were going, his ecstasy was literally spilling out of his body. Tears are coming out of his eyes, his hair is standing on end. He's not even able to speak. And he said to the devotees, he said, you're worshiping Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. He said, then perhaps in the future, he said, Radha Krishna, you'll be serving Radha Krishna deities here. He said, but to do that, he said, then you must be very careful, he said, not to make any offenses. And again, he said, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, they're so merciful. He said that if you do something accidentally, they don't even take offense. He said, they're so very merciful. Then he said, but it doesn't matter. He said, even you don't have Radha Krishna here. He said, Radha Krishna is there, he said, within Lord Chaitanya. So then after being there for 2 days, Prabhupada went to Atlanta. So he arrived in Atlanta on February 28th. And I'm going to play you, this is literally just, hopefully you'll be able to hear it okay. It's just a 2-minute lecture. This was the shortest lecture Srila Prabhupada ever gave. So we'll begin right here as he arrives and sits on the Vyasasana.
I'm very glad to see you. I'm coming. First called Mexico City.
Can you hear okay?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, I'll continue.
Yes. So Mexico City, then Caracas, then yeah.
That's me speaking to him.
I see your temple is the best.
Your temple is the best.
Parama Koruna Pahudri Jana. Two lords, Nitai Gaura Chandra, Nityananda Prabhu and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
He's already started to cry.
They are very kind. They have appeared just to reclaim the fallen souls of the sage. So they are more kind than Krishna. Krishna is also very kind. He comes to deliver, but Krishna demands first of all surrender. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu does not demand surrender. He's sober. So, accept how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and be there. Thank you.
So you see what he said. So you take shelter of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and be happy. He couldn't speak anymore. He's looking on the altar, and there on the altar are the deities, beautiful marble deities, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda. Very, very, if you haven't been to the temple in Atlanta, you can go see very, very potent deities there. Lord Nityananda in that temple, I've been there, I've gone there many times since then, even recently, been there with Japathon Maharaj. I was there just a year ago, 2 years ago with Bhakti True Maharaj. And I got to be on the altar and help with Abhishek, and the most wonderful deities there, very powerful. And I'm sure Srila Prabhupada, just seeing them, he could barely speak. But that's what he was seeing, was just how merciful these two, he calls them these two Prabhus, these two lords, Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. So at that time, he managed to get to the end. He said, thank you very much. Now you have to imagine the temple room, not a big temple room, but packed. Temple room is packed. People are looking in through the windows from outside, through the doorways. And Prabhupada just stopped speaking. And from the moment he stopped speaking, the whole place became quiet, because we'd never seen this in Srila Prabhupada. We never saw Prabhupada go into this ecstasy where he's tears, he's crying. Devotee said you could literally see, devotees would see tears fly. And then he just shut his eyes and the whole place became silent. We never knew what to do. We knew enough that we didn't make a sound. You couldn't, as they say, you could hear a pin drop. You didn't hear anyone chanting on their beads, nothing. Everyone just sat and our eyes would be fixed on Prabhupada. And then after what seemed like forever, Prabhupada would open his eyes and he'd say, chant Hare Krishna. So then a big kirtan. In the beginning, then when he arrived, he also said, do you know that tune, Paramakaruna? Prabhupada was so much in this mood, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda. And of course, we always would say yes, whatever Prabhupada said, everyone, yes, Prabhupada. So then Prabhupada tried to lead the kirtan. And of course, it was no one had any idea how to follow Prabhupada. No one could play the mridanga. No one could play the kartals. Everyone was fumbling. So then he stopped and he said, you practice and we'll do it again tomorrow. But he very much was appreciating this mood of Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda. So then, after spending there a few days, and he was there, I think 2 days later, became Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's appearance day was there. And Prabhupada, he offered artik. They put the big painting of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur on Prabhupada's Vyasasan. And they had another Vyasasan they had made for Prabhupada. He came into the temple room in the morning, and Prabhupada said, I'll do the artik. So this also would put everybody into ecstasy. Seeing us giving extra special mercy, extra special ecstasy. So Prabhupada performed the artik. So now, of course, this was 1975 in USA. So there are no Indian stores. There's no Krishna.com. There's not a lot of accessories in the temple. So they had artik paraphernalia. And then they had not very nice artik paraphernalia by the Vyasasan for Guru Puja, because that was on the altar for the deities. So Prabhupada performed the artik to his Guru Maharaj. And of course, again, all the devotees, they're just in ecstasy watching Prabhupada as pujari offering artik to his spiritual master. So then Prabhupada offers the incense, and then he offers the flame, the ghee wick. So then he has little conch shell. We all know the process. We offer artik. So then he's offering the water in the conch shell. And he's right there by the Vyasasan. And he's offering. So then he finishes. And again, the room is packed. So many devotees came from all over the East Coast, just like where you are. They came from New Jersey, from New York. They came from Florida, came from New Vrindavan. So there's hundreds of devotees there. The GBC and the temple president, they're in the doorway watching. Even they couldn't fit into the temple. There were so many devotees. So then Prabhupada finishes offering the water. And after he finished, he's looking for the bowl. He's looking for the lota to put the water in. But of course, there wasn't one there. We weren't very efficient in those days. So he's looking, and he doesn't see the bowl, the lota. So he looks, and he sees his GBC at the door, and he goes, bowl. And the devotees hear Prabhupada say bowl, and everybody goes, Hari bowl. And they raise their hand, and Prabhupada's going, bowl, and they're going, Hari bowl. So everyone's in ecstasy because Prabhupada's saying bowl, and they think he's saying Hari bowl. So the Prabhupada just shook his head, and he took the little conch shell with the water in it. And on the other side of the Vyasasan, there was Tulsi Devi in the pot. And Prabhupada just took this conch shell and he flicked the water across the Vyasasan, and it just went like a waterfall and shot into the Tulsi Devi plant. So he deposited into the Tulsi Devi. So that was Atlanta. So then he stopped in, I believe, Dallas after that. And then he went to, then he started heading towards India. And he stopped in at Bhaktivedanta Manor. So again, at Bhaktivedanta Manor, Prabhupada's speaking. And in the middle of his lecture, he goes into ecstasy. And he couldn't speak anymore. This was the third or fourth time on this trip. Everywhere he's going, Prabhupada's in ecstasy because he's seeing Lord Chaitanya. He's seeing Lord Nityananda. He's seeing Radha Krishna deities on the altar, and he's seeing thousands of devotees all around the world. He's understanding that his mission has been successful for me, and this was my own perception, but at this time, Prabhupada could understand that what he had started was a worldwide success, and there was no stopping this Krishna consciousness movement. It was firmly planted in temples all over the world. He had established deity worship. He had brought deities all over the world. As he said, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda had traveled so far to be with these people all around the world. And Prabhupada had done this. So now he's at Bhaktivedanta Manor, and he's just there a few days, but the same thing happened. He's speaking, he sees the deities, he's seeing hundreds of devotees in ecstasy, chanting, and Prabhupada's in ecstasy. And again, he stopped his class. He just at the end of a sentence, there was no formal thank you, he just stopped. And again, we would all become quiet. And then finally, Prabhupada would open his eyes. It never took more than a minute or so, but it seemed like eternity. But he opened his eyes and he go, chant Hare Krishna. So after there, London, he made one more stop in Tehran, Iran. Imagine, he's giving Krishna consciousness. There's a temple there in Tehran at that time. And Prabhupada stayed there for a day or two, eager to bring Lord Chaitanya everywhere around the world, Even in Muslim countries, especially, Prabhupada derived great ecstasy bringing his Krishna consciousness to this part of the world. And now after 2 months, this journey, he was back in India. So he went to Calcutta, his home, and then he went to Mayapur. Now, this was not the first festival, but this was what at the time was the biggest festival ever for Gaur Purnima. There are 500 devotees in Mayapur. And of course, out of the 500, 480 of them are all from the West. They have all come from the USA, from Canada, from Europe. And they're there in Mayapur on Prabhupada's instruction. This is what he wanted. He wanted the Westerners to come to these holy places, to take instruction in these holy places, to become inspired, then to go back to the West and continue their preaching work, just like he was doing. So when he gets to Mayapur, the Lotus building now is just about finished. Prabhupada stayed in his rooms. So he was in his sitting room, and in his sitting room is Bhavananda, Jaipataka Maharaj, Treya Rishi, myself, the rest of his entourage, his secretary and his Sanskrit editor. And Prabhupada was very pleased with that building, the Lotus building. And Jaipataka Maharaj, of course, he glorified Srila Prabhupada. It's Prabhupada, by your mercy, this has happened. It's all by your mercy. And Prabhupada, as he generally did, he just said, no. He said, I gave some idea, he said, but Krishna has done it. You all probably know what that building looks like in Mayapur, the Lotus building. A nice, beautiful veranda all the way around, very polished marble, windows on both sides of every room. So there was very nice breezes that would come through. So then Prabhupada continued and said, it's just the mercy of Bhakti Vinod Thakur, he said. He said it was Bhakti Vinod Thakur. He predicted that people from all over the world, they would come to this place and chant together. People from everywhere around the world. And he said, Prabhupada again in his humility, he said, and he said someone would come who would spread this Krishna consciousness movement around the world. And then Prabhupada said something he never said before or after. He said, that person I may be. So he actually said that he had done it. And as soon as he said that, he changed the subject and he looked at Jaipataka and he said, so you're growing different kinds of bananas here? So he went from saying the most profound thing. He said, I may be that person. And then he looked at him and said, so you're growing bananas? He said, you should create nice farm. And then he said, you should combine, he said, the Sarabi cow with the Jersey cow, with the Western cow. He said, because the Sarabi cow can take this very hot climate, and the Jersey cow gives very nice, abundant, creamy milk. So he said, you can put them together. So Prabhupada just completely changed the subject. And then he went down into the temple room. And again, now he's looking at Radha Madhava deities, Gaura-Nitai deities. And again, Prabhupada was in this mood, speaking so much about Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda. But now he's there in Mayapur, the birthplace, Lord Chaitanya. And Prabhupada again gave very similar lectures saying they're so kind, they're so merciful. Not like Krishna. So Krishna demands, like he said in that lecture, he demands surrender. He said, but Lord Chaitanya freely distributing. Now we have 500 people in the temple room on the ground floor of the Mayapur building. So Prabhupada was speaking, and as it happened so many times before, again he went into ecstasy and he became choked up. That would be the first thing. His words just would stop coming out. He was so ecstatic, he couldn't speak. He was feeling so much gratitude for Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda. And he just, again, stopped. So now there's temple room, 500 devotees. And all of a sudden, one of his very senior sannyasis is right behind the Vyasa-san. And even though there were 500 in there, you could not hear a sound, just the breezes in Mayapur. And all of a sudden you hear this devotee, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya. And Prabhupada opened his eyes and the kirtan began with this devotee leading the kirtan. So then the kirtan went on and it finished. So after the kirtan, Prabhupada starts walking up the stairs. And as he's walking up the stairs, behind him is myself and secretary was Brahmananda. And other devotees are there and they're talking. Why did he start that kirtan? We should have just sat there. Prabhupada was in ecstasy. We should just be quiet so he could be in ecstasy. So these discussions are going on just a few feet behind Prabhupada. And Prabhupada is just walking up the stairs very nonchalantly, goes into his room, sits down. So a few minutes later, Brahmananda and I, we both go into the room and offer our obeisances. And Prabhupada's looking at us. Generally, you just didn't go in Prabhupada's room unless he called for you. So we offer obeisances and he's looking, yes, he goes, yes. So Brahmananda, being the secretary, he starts speaking and says, Prabhupada, today when you were in the temple room, when you were in the temple room and you went into ecstasy. He said, so the devotees, they're having a disagreement. Some devotees think that we should have just remained quiet, and other devotees are thinking we should have chanted. And Prabhupada's looking at us like the foolish people we were, foolish young people we were, and he's looking. And he said, I don't do that very often. He was so sweet. He was so humble. And the words, he said it in such a way, he said, I don't do that often. And Brahmananda continued, he said, yes, Prabhupada, but when it does happen, he said, what should we do? And Prabhupada just looked at us like, you goofy people. He said, just chant Hare Krishna. Like, it's the only thing he could say. He said, just chant Hare Krishna. But yes, Prabhupada. So this was Prabhupada, and this was his disciples. Prabhupada had great affection, as he still does. He has great affection for all of us who are following him, helping him in his mission, spreading this Krishna consciousness. There's still so many towns and villages all over the world that he left for us to bring the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, because they're not content with this, with partial distribution. They literally want to see it every town and village. That prediction's there. And as we learned with Srila Prabhupada, these predictions, they're not just sayings, they're actual transcendental facts. So this is our business, and Prabhupada's given us all facility. I can see here in Vrindavan, and I see over the last year, even this COVID thing, it hasn't decreased preaching. For me, it's actually increased it. I've never given so many classes as I have since this has all begun, now that we've gotten on the computers here, gotten on Zoom and YouTube and this and that. So the opportunity is always there. We're very happy here in Vrindavan now that it seems like the authorities, the government has set aside this whole COVID thing and everything is open. All the temples are open in Vrindavan. Kumbh Mela is yesterday. No one could even move in the streets of Vrindavan. There were so many people going to this Kumbh Mela. So many people had come to Vrindavan after being locked up for several months. So it seems like the crowds are bigger than ever. Our temple.
More people than it's in a normal time.
Huh?
More people right now than in the usual days.
Yeah, that's my wife next to me. It's more than it ever was. It used to be quiet during the week. Now it's just busy. I took a little video the other day from the Samadhi up until going in the door of the temple room, nothing but lines of people waiting to take darshan of the deities. So it's in fact increased our ability to give Krishna to others, to give Krishna consciousness to others. So I know you have another class coming up with Prabhu very soon. We have a little time left if you would like, if there are any questions or comments anyone has. I hope I've given a little description.
Yes, thank you so much, Prabhu. Dear devotees, anyone has questions for Prabhu? Amrutana, Prabhu, go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you. Your narrations of past times actually transports us in one sense, and we can actually feel like whatever you and other devotees experienced with Prabhupada. Of course, we have Vani, but here we can visualize as you were saying this. Prabhu, my question for you is, I'm curious, you had such personal service with Srila Prabhupada, and now Prabhupada has departed. What specific aspect do you miss the most from that service? And the reason I ask this is so that when we try to engage, let's say if you're cooking for Prabhupada, if we try to engage in that service for Bhoga, at least our consciousness, we can try and remember that.
It's a good question. You know, I see very much that my what heals the wounds of not having Prabhupada around is doing this, just doing what I'm doing. He's present, just like we understand when we speak about, you know, Krishna is non-different from his name, his form, his paraphernalia, his pastimes. So these are Prabhupada's pastimes. So I feel the closest to him when I'm able to speak about this in the association of devotees. It's actually my balm. That's what I wanted to say. It's the soothing balm that makes that separation. And of course, it goes both ways. Huh? Like you know, chocolate, they say bittersweet, you know, or a chutney, you know, you have these two qualities are there. So in one sense, separation is a difficult thing. But there's also a sweetness in it because it brings you very close. For me, it brings me very close to Prabhupada. As far as what I miss the most or what I like the most being with Prabhupada, that's everything. I see more and more. Everything was wonderful in different ways. You know, there was a long time when I always felt it being able to touch Prabhupada, being able to massage that transcendental form was the highest amount of pleasure that I had, massaging Prabhupada's feet, massaging his head. And of course, within that, it was massaging him at nighttime in his bedroom, because that time was the most private time. In the daytime during massage, Sanskrit editor would come in and ask questions, or the secretary would come in with letters and read the letters that Prabhupada had gotten, and he would take dictation for answering the letters. So it was actually like an office, and he's getting massage while all these other things were going on. But in the evening, no one ever entered Prabhupada's room when he went in to take rest, except the servant who would give him massage. So that was the most special thing. And if he spoke, he was just speaking to you. And for myself, I would always find that the most incredible thing. The Prabhupada would just speak to me, because I always, and to this day, consider myself just a little nothing in the service of Prabhupada. So the fact that he would share himself like that with me and tell various things many times about his childhood, or even ask you something almost like advice, what you thought about this or what you thought about that, was the most wonderful thing. But then a couple years ago, I went to a festival in Los Angeles, the Prabhupada Festival, which was all of the cooks. Well, not all the cooks, but they had 7 of us there who had cooked for Prabhupada. And of course, most of them, at various times, they might have cooked for Prabhupada for a few weeks or a few months off and on here and there. But I was with them 2.5 years. And more than half of that time, I was using that cooker every day, cooking Prabhupada's lunch. So I literally cooked lunch for him maybe 500, 600 times using this cooker, which I said at that time, I said, the cooker became my best friend when I traveled with Prabhupada, because it made the impossible possible. And I started to think that massage was one thing, but there's nothing more intimate than cooking for someone, to that way, to be nourishing them, to be giving them food. Huh? We know by Ayurveda, Prabhupada said, if you want to be healthy, you cook for yourself. That's one of the number one principles in Ayurveda, is you cook for yourself. And Prabhupada told that to me in a funny way. He said, best thing is you cook for yourself. He said, because no matter what garbage you make, you'll think it's good. And again, the first principle in cooking and eating is that you like what you eat. Because if you don't like something, it doesn't matter how wonderful it is. If you don't like it, you're not going to digest it. And that's the whole basis of being healthy, is good digestion. So he said it in that way. But then I realized how while I was with him 2.5 years, every day I was practically cooking his lunch, and I was cooking for him in the evening, bringing him his hot milk, making puris and sabji. And he never complained. He complained about my cooking one day. And that was the one day I let somebody else cook, and I didn't do my service, and he chastised me for it. So in that way, I felt very, very happy that I was able to actually cook for Prabhupada. He also said that 3 things kept him alive: his morning walk, his Ayurvedic medicine, which he only took one Ayurvedic med, and his massage. So I felt very happy to be part of that as well, giving him massage twice a day to be with Prabhupada. So all those things were very, very special, and as time goes by, each and every significant, maybe so-called insignificant things, everything was significant and wonderful. And, we just look for the opportunity to be able to serve again in that way, to be useful, somehow be useful in Prabhupada's service.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All glories to you, Sruta Kirti Prabhu, for wonderfully giving us the mercy of Sri Prabhupada. If we can maybe share a few items which Sri Prabhupada liked, and maybe I'll ask you to share some recipes if you can. That will be nice, so that we can also try to serve
in the beginning. in the beginning, early on in the lockdown, when we couldn't even leave our MVT area, the gates were locked. We were locked up. I did some little cooking exhibitions, and basically everything was something Prabhupada had showed me. And I'll mention a few of them. One of them was at Bhaktivedanta Manor. And Prabhupada, a couple times he came into what was, I never had a kitchen. It was just the servant quarters with, very simple facility, just like we would have here in India in the 70s. I just had a burner on the floor, this cooker, a bucket of water. I usually didn't have I had no running water in the room. So I was using very simple facilities. So he didn't generally come in to show me something, but he would tell you, and he would tell me. So one day at the manor, he called me into the room and he said, today for lunch, he said, besides everything you make, I want you to make this preparation. So the preparation, he says, you get a liter of milk. He said, you boil it and curdle it. And you make paneer, press it, make paneer. You set the whey, keep the whey. He said, and you cut the paneer into cubes and you fry it in ghee. And then you make it nice and crispy. You fry it long time, make it nice and crispy. And then you throw that in the whey, which you have on the stove on the side. He said, then you cut potatoes, just like the paneer, cubes, and you deep fry that in ghee. You throw that into the whey. He said, then you get peas. The peas, you just throw that into the whey. You don't deep fry the peas, but you throw that into the whey. And then you cut up cauliflower at the end and you deep fry that in ghee and you throw that into the whey. So then you simmer that in the whey. You make a chance. And of course you make your chance and throw it into the boiling vegetable. So it's actually a soup. It's wet, like a soup. So the soup has your whey, your salt, your spices are in there. And you have deep fried paneer, deep fried cauliflower, deep fried potatoes, and peas in there. So I made that for him that day. So then the next day in the morning, he called me in, he said, so you make that again today. So he did that for the next 10 days. Every day he would tell me to make that preparation with the deep fried paneer and deep fried, which is all cooked in ghee. So and in the way, the taste, and I make that every now and then, sometimes for festivals and things or have people over. And it's very, very tasty. So that was one thing he showed me. In Los Angeles, in Los Angeles was very nice because he had a whole apartment, So he would walk around, he would walk through the hallway, and at the end of the hallway was the servants' quarters. And you had a door, but you never closed your door. And that was, I never even considered closing it, It just, there were certain things I instinctively understood I should do and not do. And that was one of them, was you don't close your door. So he would walk around and he stopped and he looked at me. Now this is 8 o'clock at night. He said, do you know how to make paratha? And I said, no, Prabhupada. He said, well, I'll show you. And he's got his beads, so he's chanting on his beads. And he said, you make a chapati dough and call me when it's ready. So I made a chapati dough, little salt, water, that's all, and chapati flour. He didn't say put ghee in it, he just said make chapati dough. So I did that. He came back around. I said, okay, ready, Prabhupada. He said, okay. So then he said, you put the skillet, here, what do we call, what's it made of? Cast iron, little cast iron. What's it called, a tava?
Yeah.
Tava, is that what it's called?
Yes.
So he said, you roll it out. He said, but instead of using flour, you put ghee down, like you're making a puri. You put ghee. He said, then you roll it, Then you put a little ghee on the top, you put it and you roll it. He said, now put a little ghee on it again and you put it in half. So now you have a semicircle. And you put a little more, spread a little more ghee and you roll that out. He said, then again, now you put it in quarters. So now we have, 4 layers. It's like you roll it into triangle, a paratha, like a triangle. And there's ghee in between everything. He said, now on the top of you put a little ghee and you have medium flame. And then you just start, you put it on and you get your little spoon and you press it around, make sure everything, and it starts to puff up a little bit. You spread a little more ghee on the top, he said, then you turn it over and start to press it around. You put a little more ghee on the top, and we did that 3 or 4 times, and it had very wonderful, light, flaky paratha. So then he would eat that 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. He would have paratha with maybe potatoes and eggplant and hot milk every night, steaming hot milk, boiling hot milk with a little sweetener, little sugar, sometimes a little honey. So he showed me how to make that one evening also there in Los Angeles, because the kitchen was right there. My room was a little kitchen, because all it was a board on 2 cinder blocks. And on the board was a few, little spice container, a bucket of water underneath for cleaning things. And he came in and he said, I'll show you how to make cabbage potato sabji. So he had me cut the potato, little cubes, put the ghee, always ghee. We never used oil, it was always ghee. We made ghee, put in some spices, and start to cook the potatoes some. So as you're scraping the pot at a wok, the potatoes are cooking and browning, you're scraping. Then we got the head of cabbage, cut it in half. And he said, with the knife, you just start making very thin cabbage slices like that, just thinly, like you're going to do sauerkraut. And then, of course, as the potatoes now they're halfway done, then you throw the cabbage in, and the same thing. You don't add any water. You just use the wok and the moisture from the vegetables. So it becomes very nice, kind of singed almost, very brownish. And in this way, cabbage potatoes was also something that was, I guess for me, he showed me how to do. It was simple, but very tasty. I have that's online I have a few of these, both of these are all online. I have on YouTube or somewhere. Maybe I can get them to you. If you'd like, you can share them with everyone.
Thank you.
So that was another preparation. Was there another one?
Cabbage.
I said cabbage, potato, paratha. What else did we do? That's all I can think of right now.
Right now, yes. That's what we always practice making.
Prabhu showed upma. Upma?
No, he didn't show him upma.
Upma, he didn't show me upma, but he said I made first class upma. It's been a long time since I've made upma. Upma was funny. Upma was the very first thing I ate in a temple before I joined. And I thought it was horrible, this gushy thing, salty. It was suji, but it was salty, and then have vegetables in it. For me, it was very foreign. It took me time to adjust. But then he asked me to make it for him. Maybe you're thinking about that, huh? It was while he was here in Vrindavan in 74, and he wasn't eating at all. Prabhupada was very ill. And he called me into the room. He was lying in bed. He had lost weight, hadn't eaten. And he said to me, I want you to make upma. He said, make upma for me. He said, maybe he wanted something he thought was very tasty. And at that time, Jamuna was there. Jamuna was the most famous cook in all of ISKCON, who wrote the cookbooks for ISKCON. So I left Prabhupada's room and I went right behind, and that's where we had all we had was a little burner stove, little kerosene stove behind there. And I said, Prabhupada asked for upma. So Jamuna immediately said, I'll get started. I said, Jamuna, he said he wants me to make it. He said he likes my upma. So immediately she said, okay. She said, I'll help. I'll get the ingredients. Let me know what to do. This was Jamuna. She was very, very humble, very sweet. She didn't think, why is he asking you? She just immediately. So we made the upma. We had nothing. This was Vrindavan in 1974. You couldn't go across the street and get vegetables. You had to go all the way to Lower Bazaar, and you couldn't even get a rickshaw. But anyway, she had some dehydrated peas in the trunk, her kitchen trunk for Prabhupada. So we took them out, we hydrated them, and we made upma. So then everyone was excited because Prabhupada said he was going to eat. So we made it. So then I put it a little katori on his plate, silver plate. I went in and Prabhupada just, sitting in bed. I put it down on his bed and then left the room. So we're all just waiting and waiting. So finally, after 5 minutes, he rings the bell. So I go into the room, and of course I offer obeisances, and I'm already looking into the katori to see how much he ate, and he hardly touched it, like a child, like you could see it was moved around, but it's not like he really ate anything that I could identify. So I sat up. Now imagine, Prabhupada had been ill for weeks, seriously ill. We were chanting 24 hours a day in temples around the world. It's when it started, 24-hour kirtan. And Prabhupada, the compassionate, merciful person he was, I get up and he looked at me. And he said, I want you to note, he said, this upma is first class. He said, I thought if you made something that I liked, that it would help increase my appetite. He said, but I have no appetite. He said, but I want you to know, I tasted it. He said, it's first class. So his concern in the situation was my feelings. Our concern, the whole world, is all he was thinking about was Prabhupada, his health, and he's going to stay with us and everything will be okay and he has to come back. But Prabhupada was so compassionate and so kind, he wanted to let me know that it was very nice, so that I wasn't disappointed. So this was Prabhupada. So how can you not have attachment to such a person? Huh? Such an amazing person, most wonderful person, and yet he's concerned about your feelings. So this is our Prabhupada. So this is who we're serving, all of us. We're all engaged in service to Srila Prabhupada through so many agencies, so many instruments, but our business is serving Prabhupada's ISKCON, his society, Prabhupada's society. He said he's non-different from this society. It's his creation. So my message always to everyone is that we have to understand we're all serving Srila Prabhupada personally. It's personal. Everything is personal. It's not just some impersonal thing. Whatever we're doing, we're serving Prabhupada personally. I see this one question popped up. Would Prabhupada eat spicy food or mild? I cooked for him very mild. Little bit of spice, not much heat. Chili, hardly any chili. I generally used a little cumin, little hing, turmeric, of course, was there. I used this is what Prabhupada showed me when he showed me how to use the cooker. And again, I did this for 2.5 years, and he never complained, said that the prasadam was dull or too spicy, but he ate it every day. He ate many, many chapatis. He loved chapatis. Every day he had chapatis, Prabhupada, with his lunch. Every day chapatis were there. But no, it just like he describes in Bhagavad Gita, too much spice, Prabhupada calls it exciting. He said not to use exciting, not in a happy way. Exciting is that it excites, it agitates the senses. He said, so devotee eats in the mode of goodness. So mode of goodness means not overly spicy, little bit of spice for taste. Ourselves, as we get older, the only spice I even use now in anything is hing, asafoetida. Otherwise, if something's hot, can't even digest, So, for our health, we do what is good for our health. And that's what Prabhupada did. He liked things tasty, but no, not overly spicy. And of course, he would eat fried things on occasion, special occasion. But on a daily basis, he had his local fruits for breakfast, with maybe milk or yogurt, depending on the season. Lunchtime was always rice, chapatis, dal, and just a few different subjis. Bitter melon was something he liked very much. Bitter melon, I would just cut it up like you do. It looks like, nickels or quarters, and just fry it in ghee and turmeric, a lot of turmeric. Little salt, little turmeric and ghee, make it a little crispy. Is very tasty. And that's good for digestion, good for appetite. So Prabhupada did things very much according to Ayurvedic ways. And in this way, he kept healthy and was able to travel. It was very difficult traveling. And that's why it was important to have a cook, so that you're not, everywhere you go, you don't have somebody different cooking for you. That's not a way to be healthy. Way to be healthy is you have consistency. So more and more, I understood that me cooking for Prabhupada every day was actually something that was very valuable, important service personally.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for sharing. Our Bhakti Ratnaka Prabhu has a question. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you, Krishna Guru. Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much for this wonderful pastimes you have shared. As Amritanand Prabhu told, you have really transported us to that times and those situations. But what we want to imbibe the same service mood you have in serving Srila Prabhupada. We want to imbibe the same mood which you all have.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, thank you so much for sharing that mood. So we'll try to imbibe it.
Thank you.
Prabhuji, my only question is, did that devotee lady, after she heard about the Maya is in you, did she turn back and became a devotee? I was just curious, so I thought.
I don't know the outcome. My god sister told me that no, she again, struggled, I guess at that time at least. I don't know long term what happened to her, but that happens sometimes. If we look too much outward and what others are doing, it's very easy to become discouraged and disgruntled. Because when we imagine 1975, this was in Caracas, and everywhere, people come to the temple. You don't come into the temple as a pure devotee. We're coming in at the beginning. It's a process. It takes, as I'm seeing now, I'm at 50 years. And you see Krishna consciousness is a process. It's not something you come in at the top and you stay at the top. We come in learning, and after some time we realize how strong these senses are. Initially you think, oh, everything's very easy. But then when you start to try to control the senses, you can understand how difficult it is to actually always be attitude of servant, just servant of Krishna, not the enjoyer. We all come, we think we're the enjoyers. So I don't know what her fate was, but it at the same time, it wasn't much different from many others that I've seen and heard from over the years, myself included. I could, I say to this day, for me, from practically the beginning, I was in the temple for a year. I became Prabhupada's servant for 2.5 years. And then again, I was back in temples. And if I was to look and judge, I would see no one was managing the way Prabhupada managed. No one showed that care that Prabhupada showed. No one had that compassion that Prabhupada had, that mercy that Prabhupada had, or was able to see nothing but the good that others were doing. And I often had difficulty with managers, and I would think they're not very nice to to the devotees in the temple. But see, that also is my own problem by not seeing things from a pure platform. So it's only when, as Prabhupada said, you see everyone's in Maya because you're in Maya. The devotee doesn't see everyone in Maya. He sees their struggles, how they're struggling to serve Krishna very nicely. So that's something that's very important for all of us to protect ourselves in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, we go away. And we think our going away is of our own volition. It's our own desire, but actually it's Krishna kicking us out of the temple because of our critical attitudes towards others. We think, I'm not going to do service. I'm not going to be part of this society. We think it's our own decision, but actually that's Maya. That's Maya that's putting us in that situation, taking us away from the opportunity to serve Krishna, to serve Krishna's devotees. So everything I see, and that's why here in Vrindavan Temple, I'm very happy because I see in the temple president here, he has that attitude, just wants to engage everyone in Krishna's service. He's not proud and thinking he wants it for himself. He's not afraid to have God brothers around him, people that have been around a long time giving him advice. If that's our attitude, then it shows our own Krishna consciousness is suffering. So for me, it goes both ways. I see, I see the difficulties others have in having that compassionate nature of Srila Prabhupada. And at the same time, I realize that own struggle is within myself. So in that way, it's a very good lesson for me. So I try very much here. I attend the morning program, go to Mangalarti, go to Guru Puja, attend the classes. And this is what Prabhupada wants. So the more we do, as I started out reading that letter, Prabhupada said, you follow my instructions. Everything else is taken care of. It's not independently we think, oh, I've got to go do this and got to do this. And these things are also entering our society, aren't they? We think all these other things that Prabhupada never introduced. We've got to do this, just like this Kumbh Mela. Our business is to go there to give Krishna to others, to give Prabhupada to others, not to try to get something from this crowd of people. We go there because we have something to offer them by Prabhupada's mercy. So. Does that make sense?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And that answers definitely. Actually, it is an answer for us that we are in Maya, Prabhuji. So that's why I was curious to answer that it is a lesson for us from this incident. And please bless us that we have the same service mood as you. Like our temple president also gives us a chance, Madhupati Das Prabhu. So we can serve the temple. Thank you very much.
That's our business, is to encourage everyone we meet in their devotional life, to help them in their devotion. And if we do that, we help ourselves. That's how we help ourselves, by helping others. All right.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Srimati Mataji has a question. Should we take that one question, or Prabhu, or should we stop here?
Yeah, go ahead. One more question. Yes.
Srimati Mataji, quickly go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dhanvat Pranam. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to you. Thank you very much for blessing us again with a wonderful class. As all the devotees have said, you have taken us to all the places where Prabhupada visited, and you have shared what Prabhupada has shared with you very compassionately. You showed everything. Prabhuji, I have a quick question. I mean, you are all empowered souls in Prabhupada mission. It's been said by Prabhupada many times that Krishna has sent you all to assist Prabhupada in this pious mission of Krishna consciousness. But I've always wondered that how were you able to be so much dedicated towards Prabhupada at that initial stages itself? I mean, some might have taken a lot of time, but few of the Prabhupada disciples were like, quickly, Prabhupada, you are everything, because it's hard. The general understanding what other disciples of Prabhupada has given is you were all open-minded because it was not filled up with other sort of philosophy, and Indians have a lot of other philosophies in their mind, so it was easy to
Yes.
accept the concept of philosophy. But keeping the philosophy point on the other side, the surrenderance to the spiritual master or anybody, if you say, was not a accepted concept in Western side. It was always like me in the center, me in the center. I mean, how were you able to do that? I just wanted to know. Were you in person and all of that?
Well, like you say, personally, I told recently the story about the violinist. I actually have my father-in-law. He's a big concert violinist. And there's a story about the violin teacher. And when his student comes, he asks him, have you had any lessons? So if the student says yes, then he charges more because he has to unlearn all these different things that he's learned in the wrong way. So, that's what Prabhupada would say, just like in India. He said, India is all hodgepodge. There's so much philosophy, Vedas, this, and everyone has their own idea. I remember when I first came to India with Prabhupada, sometimes going to people's houses, life members, they would become life members, but they didn't understand what Prabhupada was doing. They didn't understand Prabhupada was giving Krishna consciousness. He was Krishna as a supreme personality of Godhead. And to this day, we can, sometimes I'll go to houses and you'll see the altars and they'll have Radha Krishna there. They may have Lord Chaitanya there and they'll have their spiritual master there. But then over in the side, there's a picture of Sai Baba, and there's a picture of this one. Because they, other places I've been, I've seen where, the pictures, of course, have Lord Brahma, Saraswati, and Kali Ma, and pictures of even Jesus in there. Because they think, well, I want to cover all my bases just in case this one is important and this is important. But as we say, Prabhupada preached, give up everything. All this nonsense you've learned, you've got to give it up and surrender to Krishna. So as Westerners, we were very fortunate that we didn't have all this hodgepodge in our head. So when Prabhupada said Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, and he says, surrender to me, my thing was, okay, that's all I needed to hear. All this other lifetimes and lifetimes of trying all these different things, it was gone in a moment. I had no recollection of it. I was raised Catholic boy. We saw God as a person. They didn't know who he was, but at least our understanding was God was a person. So everything Prabhupada said, I immediately accepted. So in that way, I was very fortunate. And then growing up in the society at that time in ISKCON, it was a family, and family, there's different things they say, even within the material world here, they have different understanding. Once something grows more than a couple hundred, that family atmosphere, very difficult to keep. But somehow or other, Prabhupada was able to make us all feel like we were part of the same family because he was our father. He was everybody's father. So it was the early days. It was the beginning. Everything we had, understanding or not understanding, everything we had, all our inspiration was coming from him. He was the source of everything that happened. Like he would say, our chanting wasn't our chanting, it was his chanting, and his desire was that strong that he was able to make all of us dance according to his desire. And sometimes we had a lot of missteps. We made our mistakes. We still make mistakes. None of us are perfect, but Prabhupada was perfect. So the more we tried to follow him, the more successful we were. We could be successful. And now we get to see as final days are approaching, many of us. I'm 70 years old in a couple of months. So many God brothers every day. It seems like another God brother or God sister is leaving, and we see all of their efforts all comes to fruition at the time of death. And Prabhupada is there for them. The holy name is there for them. Kirtan is there for them. He doesn't neglect any of us. So this, as life goes on, we get to see Krishna is there, and Krishna is controlling everything. And that's the goal for all of us, is to understand Krishna is in control. But we think we're in control, and we try to manipulate everything in certain ways for our own satisfaction, for our own comforts, according to our desires. But the more we do surrender to Krishna, you actually begin to see Krishna is in control. And if we just do our service, everything's taken care of. And, I get to see that all the time, living here in Vrindavan now for a year. This was our desire, and I had no idea how to do it. But it's going on day by day, automatically by Krishna's arrangement. It's not, I don't have to do anything other than surrender to Krishna. And the more you do that, the more inspired you become. And the more you get to understand Krishna's taking care of us. He is taking care of all of us. We're all very fortunate, and more we realize that, the more good fortune's possible for us. So you're all doing wonderful service there. That have a group like this. I see so many are here, almost 50 devotees currently here, and you have to help one another. You have to see the good in each other and encourage one another to serve Srila Prabhupada's mission. And the more you do that, the more you'll be blessed by Prabhupada. So it's all his blessings. I have nothing. I have nothing to give but tell you Prabhupada can give you all blessings. You just have to sincerely serve. So if I have to give, you just do that.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you. You shows what we have to learn from you. Thank you, Prabhuji. Quick 3 things, Prabhuji. Advance wishes for your Krishna conscious birthday. You said it's coming up. We all will pray in our capacity so that you can wonderfully serve more towards your Guru and this mission. Second thing is I want to see Mataji, Prabhuji. Mataji has been next to
Mataji.
you. Yeah.
Yes, let me show you. Here's Mataji. She got all dressed up for Krishna Balaram today.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Thank you very much, Mataji, for wonderfully. Thank you for serving
she's
Prabhuji.
Constant. She's
thank you. I mean, I
me.
just wanted to thank you and gratitude the way you are serving the Vrindavan temple deities jewelry section, each and everything very nicely. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mataji.
She's taking very nice care. She has a whole group of ladies who are cleaning everything, all the Lord's paraphernalia now. They're in ecstasy, holding Balaram's clubs and the deities' crowns and polishing them and doing a lot of wonderful things. My birthday is Yogini.
The shine and glow what she is giving to the deities' paraphernalia, we can see in one glimpse of Mataji here. Just you showed us one glimpse, but Krishna is showering that here. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Mataji. Thank you. And Prabhuji, last thing, could you share about your book? Because still Amazon says it's not available yet and all those things. So, will it be soon available?
Yes, it will be available soon, and I'll definitely let you know when the physical hard card copy is available. Yes, I have a god sister working on printing it there as it's required. It is on Amazon now as an ebook. You can get it on Amazon.
Yeah, Kindle.
But if you want a hard copy, hopefully within the next month it'll be available. I actually need to speak with her and find out what's going on because I haven't heard from her in a week. Sure. But it will be there.
Sure.
And
Thank you very much.
Yes. All right.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's getting late here.
Yes.
So
thank you so
again,
much,
everyone.
Yes.
And we'll see you all soon. And we're all connected together by Prabhupada's kindness. So thank you all again. And one of these days, maybe physically we'll get to come visit you in the temple and we can all chant and dance together.
Yes, Prabhu, absolutely. You are most invited. You please accept our
Thank you.
respectful obeisances. Please come again.
Right.
Vancha kalpatarubhyasya
Vaishya
kripa sindhuvya
Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namah.
Vishnu ki
वैष्णववृंद की जय
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki
प्रभुपाद
jai.
की
jai.
जय
Yes, Sutta Kirti Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.